Hello and welcome to my next video. This is going to be hopefully a very short video on money markets, and it's really looking at money markets from the Keynesian perspective. So Keynes came along with something called a liquidity preference theory, and you can break his theory down in more than one way, but I think the simplest way to think about his liquidity preference theory, in other words, why do people hold money, I was thinking about three reasons. There's a transactions demand, a precautionary demand, and a speculative demand. Now, when we talk about the speculative demand or motive, that's the important one. That's the one that had not been thought of before. So let me backtrack. Transactions demand. Prior to Keynes, economists said, well, it doesn't make any sense to hold cash. And recall when he was writing in the 1930s, it was mainly cash, some checks. You didn't have debit cards, credit cards, cryptocurrency, any of that kind of stuff. So why would wealthy people, people that had plenty of income, well, why would they hold any extra cash above what they would need for immediate purchases? That's really just the transactions demand. And classical economists, that's what they thought about the demand for money. You hold just enough to make current payments. Uh, certainly, you want to hold maybe a little for emergency purposes. So, classical, that's pre Keynesian, would argue for precautionary demand too. That's just for emergency purposes. But as I said, the speculative demand is the important one. Keynes said it makes perfect sense, even though in an opportunity cost sense, you're foregoing other income, you're foregoing interest you could earn if that currency was in a bank drawing an interest, or you had purchased stocks or bonds. He actually used bonds, consoles is a type of bond. But in general, that's the idea. Why would you hold excess currency, idle cash balances, if you will, above what you need for making day-to-day purchases and maybe a little extra? Perfectly rational, makes sense from a Keynesian perspective because you want to hold some extra cash for speculative purpose so that you have liquidity, you have cash on hand that if you see a really good bargain, you can jump on it. Now, I'm not really talking about the consumer. I'm talking about wealthy people making business investment decisions. So if you see a good company to purchase, you want that extra cash to be able to jump in and be the first bidder, the highest bidder, and get that. So that's the speculative demand. Now, what that really does, that speculative demand, and I apologize for that little note that you saw. That was an old note. What that does is it makes the speculative motive a negative function of interest rates. This was not something that had been thought of before. So that was an important contribution. And I apologize for looking way up, but my monitor where I am today is way up here. So I do apologize. So we can think of the demand for money, money demand, as being a negatively sloped curve, just like most demand curves. It's not linear. There are various reasons for that. For these purposes, we're not really concerned about that. It's just the fact that as the interest rates increase, then wealth holders can earn a pretty decent income by foregoing extra cash. So maybe they wouldn't hold a whole bunch of extra cash. But then if interest rates are very low anyway, and they're not giving up that much interest earned, and they've got that money to speculate on. So that's the key liquidity preference contribution, in my opinion, is connecting money demand with interest rates. Now, when it comes to a shift in the money demand curve, the demand for money curve, anything that impacts transactions demand, precautionary demand, speculative demand. So if it looks like we're entering into a period of growth where there might be more opportunities, you might hold extra cash. If incomes in general are rising, and at the particular level, a wealth holder, they have more income, they're going to buy more stuff, so they need more money for transactions purposes. So any of those kind of things would shift the money demand curve to the right or the left. An increase in income, for example, that would increase that transactions motive would shift it to the right. A decrease in income would shift it to the left, as an example. Okay, now we're going to take the money supply curve or the supply of money curve as being given. And what I mean by that is the Fed, within certain parameters, can set the interest rate at, the money supply at what they want to. Again, that's not 100% accurate, but for first approximation, that's true. So, money supply curve, the supply money curve, is a vertical line coming out at the quantity of money that the Fed wants to set it at. What quantity do we measure? M1, M2. Well, the Fed typically actually looks at M2, but we're going to play like it's M1. It's simple. All right. So if the Fed increases the money supply, that would cause a rightward shift in the supply money curve. If they decrease the money supply, that would be a leftward shift. Now, the interaction obviously is supply and demand, same story, determines interest rates. It turns out that the interest rate or rates that we're talking about here are short term interest rates. So that's how interest rates are determined, at least from the Keynesian perspective. So if there's an increase in the supply of money, other things being equal, short-term interest rates should fall. That would be a shift to the right of the money supply curve. If the money supply curve decreases, that should cause interest rates to increase. Now, increase in the money demand, increase in the demand for money, say from this DM1 to DM2, that's going to tend to increase short-term interest rates. A decrease in the money demand for money curve will tend to decrease interest rates. And this is the analysis of money markets for short-term interest rates. It's more problematic when we're looking at long-term interest rates because there's other factors that play a role in determining long-term interest rates, one of which is a very important one. I'm not saying others are not, but it's a very important one, and that's expectations of future profits. We'll talk about that in another video.